One of the most important principles we have to remember as artists is we paint for fun. We paint because we enjoy it, and we mustn't take it too seriously. Now, I know everyone wants to improve their painting, but it's important to take time and simply enjoy a little painting. And one of my favorite ways to do that is in a little book like this with some gouache paints. So today I'm just going to show you one of my little fun paintings I do to unwind and relax, usually with a bit of music going in the background, and a quick gouache study is the perfect antidote to a stressful day. I hope you enjoy it. I'm starting a new watercolor sketchbook. This one by Lightwish, quite an attractive looking travel sketchbook, and it's got these spiral bound clips that you can unclip and replace the paper. Nice 100% cotton cold press paper, 300 grams. Just the sort of thing that makes a great gouache book as well. I'm going to start off with toning the paper, which I like to do when I remember. I'm actually using watercolor to tone this. And once it's dried, I'm going to do a quick sketch. Nothing too fancy here, just placing the farm building and getting my thoughts on the subject. And that's it, really. I'm just aiming for a nice little peaceful sketch here with a bit of light and shadow, and these Cape farm style buildings. This one out in the Karoo region in South Africa, surrounded by the acacia thorn bushes. Very attractive. Now I'm putting on a bit of titanium white with a little bit of yellow for the sky, and because I'm going over the watercolor area, you can see some of that's coming through, but that's not a problem. It falls within the warm light that I'm after, and I'll go over it again later on once that gouache has settled and dried a bit. So we press on, and in typical fashion, I'm going to get the dark shapes in because those are so important to counterpoint with the light value shapes. Mostly ultramarine, and you can see how the gouache, the first layers of gouache really do soak up into that paper. Gouache dries pretty quickly, which is quite nice actually. I kind of prefer it to acrylics, but then again, you can work large scale with acrylics. In gouache, it's much more difficult because getting your color matches with gouache is really very tricky. You need to mix a lot of color, and that's not really practical with gouache. So the small sketch is the ideal subject, and that titanium white adds a really nice, strong, bright touch to the painting. I'm using Winsor & Newton for the most part. This titanium white's actually Daniel Smith, but the other colors pretty much all Winsor & Newton. It's quite difficult to find many brands of gouache where I live, so Winsor & Newton is definitely the most popular designer's gouache, and it's good quality as well. And I'll try to stick to the same colors I use pretty much throughout all my painting. That is the warms and cools for the primary colors, titanium white, burnt sienna, and yellow ochre. So this cool shaded color is just the typical blue, a touch of alizarin, and the side of the building in shadow you can see is not that dark, but it's just got to be distinctly cooler looking to really get that sort of reach for the sunglasses brightness against the lights. First layers with gouache tend to settle, and then you would go in with a second layer on top of that. The hillside at the back, a yellow ochre, will be the right color, a little touch lighter. Gouache obviously dries darker than you see it when it's wet, and that can be slightly misleading. So it's quite common to go back in with your gouache and apply a lighter second layer because you've got a value darker than you expected. And just by practicing, you'll get more and more accurate with that. This light gray color, sort of mimicking the galvanized iron roof of the building. And the little attic window, all in the typical, what they call the Cape vernacular of these buildings. Getting in a second layer already of the lights. And you can see using a fairly large brush, basically a number 4 brush, and now switching to the 1-inch large flat brush just to get that sky color back in. And I wouldn't be surprised if I come back later with a third pass over the sky to get the right brightness I'm looking for. But in quick order, we've got the bones of the painting. And now I'm going to start putting the lights down. And these sort of lemon yellow strokes looking quite bright, but of course they will settle. And I'll add in a few middle value colors as well. Suggest a few sky holes, just break up the shapes a bit. Where you see a diagonal, for instance, on the tree line, looks a bit artificial. Cut in with the sky color and break it up a bit. And now we've got the entire foreground and this sort of hard scrabble landscape. Yeah, you've got to sort of try to get some texture into it as well. And I'm adding tree trunks just to break up the shape a bit, but get a little bit of burnt sienna against the green, which adds a nice little counterpoint there as well of complementary color. Lots of scumbling in the foreground with the cold pressed paper. And if you do a few quick strokes of the paintbrush, you'll get some nice broken color. And now this is all about creating texture and a variety of color, temperature, shapes. Putting a light against a dark and a warm against a cool to add visual variety as one color note plays against the other and gives the eye something to consider, and that makes for a more interesting painting. Even a small sketch like this, it's got a main theme, but a little bit of variety in texture and shape entertains the viewer. And that's part of the artist's duty, I think. Suggesting a few little shadows. A shadow under the roof line, for instance, is important. And at the base of the building, just to connect things to the earth. And a few shadows can also help to break up shapes as well, or suggest a glimpse of light amongst a shadow. Let's just soften that edge against the sky because it's getting a little too much attention. And I want to just push it further into the background. Now back into the foreground with white and deep yellow, cadmium deep yellow, big brush strokes. So it would pretty much entail a completion of the blocking in, and now we're heading into the refining of shapes and adding or suggesting some further details. A variation of brushstroke creates little variation in these shapes and therefore a bit more texture. I'm deciding to lighten that hillside at the back a little further. And now bring out a little more color amongst the trees. As that first layer has dried down a little, I can add a richer experience just by layering some colors. Slightly cooler color notes amongst the warm yellows as well. Now we've got the windmill, as we call it, although it's more like a water pump, which is a ubiquitous sight in this part of the world. Looks like this farm has two water pumps quite close to each other, but I'm just going to put in the one for a nice vertical element, using a light blue to push it back a bit, and a bit of titanium white to suggest some bright reflections. I think we also need to add a figure. Just to add a little bit of life and scale to the painting. Just a light note or two to suggest facial features, but no details, and of course a shadow to connect the figure to the landscape. And yeah, a touch more red there just for a splash of color. And that's it really. A few little extra refinements, maybe a fence as well, just to break up the foreground, add some strong compositional elements. It's always fun to do these sketches. They really don't require a lot of study. It's going through the basics, I should say, getting everything in place, composition, color, wires, and values. And there's the little bit of a brighter touch to the sky. Get that strong sunlight effect. That's it, really. Couple of highlights, a few dark accents in the foreground here or there, a few last touches of brights against the building. I think a little more texture in that roof. And let that settle a bit as well. Well, there we go. I'll sign that off. And that's it. A fun little relaxing gouache sketch. Well, there you go. I hope that's inspired you to just do some little painting for fun. No pressure. These painting sketches are worth a small fortune because they really make you relax. And that is good for your health, the mind, all of those things that we want to look after. Now, before I go, you're going to get a lot more inspiration from our magazine, Create Art Magazine. It's a free subscription. Go to createartmagazine.com or have a look in the description below and grab your free magazine subscription. You'll get a lot out of it. And of course, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any videos coming up in the future. Well, until next time, enjoy your painting sketches and cheers for now.